is fundamentally mistaken, is fundamentally incorrect. Attachment arises, aversion arises, unhappiness, suffering arises.
This one, oh, that is that Sonjing and Lajakar, or Tachoros Kanga Tigre, Tato, the Noa Chipo, tell Reson in Lekachana.
No
Chipo, Tagaro Reson in Lekachana, Kanga no, then the Tay is as you said, no, ya Marda, Tumbago was.
Because they understand that if we continue to behave and engage in the world based upon thinking that these appearances are real, because that will continue to lead us in a mistaken direction. That's why we need to think about how these appearances really are. Therefore, we say form is emptiness, right? These things do not have any inherent existence.
Oh, that's one jig as well. Tato, the Loni Tungajakon, Patachi, Pajasha Jatachi, Chuashi Susares.
Suk lokatsu?
Sonji pen Loni to Kazari, Rosara, Nobel the pen is Colossul, Tato, the Digita Garis, Pachin Susares.
So 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha appeared in this world, he spoke this truth of how we should be perceiving form. Form is emptiness.
Oh, Terry, but and the Halley Capares, you are ten. That's Zul, Abalayo, Tato Tanda, Contemporary, Kashik and Derek Kashik,
And scientists, they haven't been able necessarily to come up with a better alternative, because as they peel back the layers of form, right, as they peel back the layers of the phenomena that they're observing, they always find a more subtle level and a more subtle level and a more subtle level. None of those discoveries is static, right?
Oh, that Kashik again, what you Tama, Kashik land, what you
So these scientists go back and some say there's only like this kind of radiance that is there. It's only energy that is really there. That's the real thing, that energy. It is only the interactions of different things, right? As soon as they think they've found something, they realize they haven't found it. So also some kind of come to the conclusion as they probe deeper and deeper and deeper, oh, maybe there's nothing there at all, right? And that kind of really blows their mind.
Again?
So some people might say, well, and some people might say, well, if there were no good or bad appearances at all, if there was nothing from the side of the object at all, how could we experience things like benefit and harm, for example? And then we would take the discussion and say, we're not saying that there is nothing there at all. That's not what's being said. And in fact, it's dealing with this objection. That's why we have this paradox in the Heart Sutra. First, the Buddha says form is emptiness, right? Then the sutra says emptiness is form. It's saying that there isn't nothing there at all. It's from the ground of emptiness that these various forms that lack inherent existence arise. So really, if we understand the import of what the Heart Sutra is indicating, if we learn how to perceive phenomena such as form correctly, we'll have no basis for the arising of a lot of the problems and dissatisfaction that we experience. So let the antidote be freed in its own place. So as Geshe mentioned before, here we're talking about the object possessor or the subject. So if you're using this text as a text for meditation, you know that when you say examine the nature of the unborn awareness, there you're talking about the emptiness of the object, and then let even the antidote be freed in its own place. There you're thinking about the emptiness of the object possessor. In other words, the subject, the meditator. Yeah. So another thing is that they talk about the unborn awareness. Actually, the translator is translating unborn awareness as kunji namshi, which I would translate as mind basis of all, or the alaya vijnana consciousness. So Geshe said the alaya vijnana consciousness, the mind basis of all, is a fundamental tenet of the mind-only school, right? But in Prasangika, we're holding that's not the final view. He's just noting that. So if you're meditating according to like the mind-only school or whatever, here you can just take the words at their face value, right? But if you want to go beyond that, you have to question a little bit. Because they're still holding on to some aspect of true existence of mind, then the Chittamantrans, the mind-only school, they have to posit somewhere where the wholesome karma and the unwholesome karma, where those potentialities go. And they say that those potentialities or those imprints are stored in this kunji namshe, which translates literally as mind basis of all. That's the alaya vijnana consciousness. So mind basis of all, the kun indicates all imprints, both wholesome and unwholesome. So understand that the Majjhimika Prasangakas, right? And that's that most teachers in our tradition are upholding this view of the middle way consequence, the Majjhimika Prasangakas. They aren't holding this view of the mind basis of all, actually. So the mind only proponents, they're holding kind of 8 different types of consciousness, whereas the Prasangakas, at least in the Prasangaka view that Lama Tsongkhapa is putting forth, Trukurwa, there's only 6. So in this way, we've covered the teaching on ultimate bodhicitta, which of course is talking about emptiness. And we talked about emptiness from the point of view of the object, as well as emptiness from the point of view of the subject. Now we're going to do more emptiness. We're going to turn to the in praise of dependent arising. Yeah, and so we are on... Oh, so we are on verse number 30. The one you have doesn't have the verse numbered, so we're the 3rd paragraph from the bottom in the text that you have. And it goes, this very path of dependent arising, the reason for seeing your words as unparalleled, generates conviction in the validity of other teachings. So Lama Tsongkhapa here, understanding finally the import of the teachings upon dependent arising, according to the actual intention of the Buddha, he was kind of amazed and then saw that the Buddha's words really were unparalleled. In other words, there was nothing more supreme. And in this way, he was able to generate faith in all of his teachings. So number 31, having seen the truth you taught it, those following you will leave all troubles far behind, for they will cut the root of every fault.
Dela tene da nyoda kanga pata riren ronen nyapa kanga la tsawa pho nobody thoyong kon na bochi.
So here, Lama Tsongkhapa is explaining that if one is really able to penetrate the teachings on dependent arising, both coarse and subtle, according to the intention of the Buddha, then all of the negativities accumulated, these are cleared away, as well as the roots, the causes of these negativities and difficulties.
Ta kanga yopa kanga lo ta riren roya nyapa kanga lo tsawa pho ge duya ge ne chi ta pa thoyong de tene ko pe wa man ra shi ge yares.
So all of one's problems, they are sort of banished to far, far away, as well as the basis for accumulating any fault, any negativity. This is also extinguished. How amazing is a teaching that helps us to do this. Therefore, Je Tsongkhapa praises the Buddha according to that.
Tan del tene ama ji japa ge sit ne be jan so so go ja ki pe kala ane so no to na hale pe to chembo lila le mo je je to me ko la ne je di je ne mo to je jo to me jo mi jo ban jo se shulo ka ji.
So Geshe said, connected with this verse is a verse from Aryadeva's 400 stanzas.
Lila le mo je je to seri pena li umbo zala ba yina li kangal cha umbo kangal cha den du has.
On the basis, so this verse says something like, on the basis of the body consciousness, the body is experienced.
Similarly,
it is on the basis of ignorance that all of the other afflictions, all of the other delusions are able to function. So what's the import of this? Really think about this. This means that if we are able to realize emptiness, we are able to attack the very root, that basis, like the body consciousness is the basis for the body and all the feelings are experienced, that basis for the arising of all of the afflictions. If we are able to undermine that root, then we don't have to cultivate an individual antidote for attachment, anger, and the other afflictions. We've done all the work in one fell swoop. Through eliminating ignorance, all afflictions are eliminated.
Yeah. So
think about your daily experience, right? Think about your daily experience and even how a minor thing can affect us. We see a tree that's maybe like moth-eaten or not doing too well. That gives rise to thoughts of sadness or aversion. We see a beautiful tree that gives rise to attachment, right? But if we eliminate the basis of ignorance, rather than each time we encounter an object that makes us angry, for example, having to go through the whole thing of cultivating the antidotes, if we've tackled ignorance, there's no basis for the arising of that affliction at all. Yeah, so Geshe said, it's some people might ask, well, why is Geshe using the example of the tree? It's because a lot of the teachings on attachment and so forth that we find in Buddhism are using a little bit heavier examples, but actually the tree also illustrates it really well. His Holiness the Dalai Lama really kind of again and again in a very kind of open way has stated, right? If we realize emptiness and uproot ignorance, we won't have to cultivate all of these individual antidotes for attachment, aversion, and so forth, because those will also be uprooted. So in that way, we have covered at least 2 of these shlokas of these stanzas. So actually, Geshe said that we usually cultivate method and wisdom together. Here we were both more on the wisdom side, because the portion of the text that we happened to cover was about ultimate bodhicitta and the 7-point mind training, and we also did this point on in praise of dependent arising. But also remember how important the method side of the practice is. Buddha Shakyamuni himself stated that those great hero disciples, Shariputra and Modgalyayana, right? If they meditated upon emptiness for 1 eon, the merits of their meditation would not equal the merits of one who meditates on emptiness with the thought of bodhicitta, a bodhisattva who meditates on emptiness for even 1 day. How did that great power and vastness get unlocked? By infusing that emptiness with the practices from the method side, with the practices of love and compassion. Therefore, if we think about that, then also we see how important love and compassion are, and we can cultivate a real happiness of being able to bring them forth. So thank you very much. Geshe will leave it here. We're going to dedicate the merits, and then we'll take questions. If you'd like to leave after the dedication, please do. If you'd like to stay for questions, you are most welcome. Changju semjo rinpoche maje pana chejo rechi chewa nyamba meba ya gone gondu pewa reshu tongni tawa rinpoche maje pana chejo rechi Shewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu bewa risho Jambel bao jita kemba dang Gudu zambo deyon de jinde Deda gungi jesu dalo chi Gewa dida tamshe rabdungo Dizu shebe gyawa tamshe ki Ngawa gangla chudu ngaba de Dagi gewe tsawa digun Zambo chuji radu ngwa ki On the basis of the merits accumulated by ourselves and others, then may all beings be able to bring forth wholesome thoughts of wishing to benefit. Through the force of these merits, may the sun of happiness shine with equality on all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara. Also, because I need to be able to have the conditions to practice and reach the result through the force of these merits, may my mental health and may my physical health be stable and conducive. And through the force of these merits, may any being experiencing the suffering of mental illness, may any being experiencing the suffering of physical illness, through the force of these merits, may those causes be completely cleared away, and may they abide in happiness. So we'll pause there. Just going to turn up the volume, excuse me, to Geshe and all of you while I do that. All right, please. Excuse me. knocking things over here.
I just wanted to comment that what an incredible teaching this was for me today, and I really valued the meditation on going for refuge, and the teachings were just so phenomenal. Thank you so much. I wanted to say thank you.
Yo Lisa tuji che shebo shugi esko dering halepe pento chembo shu zondi sungshe ting samone ane kepar chen di kyamjo kola gomjai di ko halepe semchu che as tuji che shugi yosa. Thank you so much, Geshe. Geshe is very modest about praise, but he's smiling, so I'm sure that it was encouraging for him to hear that. Yeah.
Question from Dinah, I think.
Yes, go ahead, Donna.
Good morning, Lama. Good morning, Geshe. Yes, I've heard recently the combination of emptiness and bodhicitta together. And I've heard 3 different words used to talk about how that is aspired. And one, they say bodhicitta infused with emptiness, or no, emptiness infused with bodhicitta, or the word suffused, or the word imbued. And so, it's infused is extracting from, like tea. You put a tea bag in water and the essence is released into the water. Suffused gradually spread through or over, and imbued is inspired or permeated with. So there's all those things when those two come together. Can he explain that magic combination of bodhicitta and emptiness?
Dinah, I think that so to be honest with you, I don't know all of the Tibetan words. Like, these are not words that I use very often, but I think what you're pointing to is actually an error of mine, for which I am grateful. So Geshe was using the same Tibetan word each time, and so I should be saying imbued, not suffused. So this was my error. Yes, sinpe. The Tibetan word is sinpe. So sinpe means to be, I think, imbued with. So thank you for saying that, because that's the word I'll use from now on. Yeah. So it should always be imbued. Does that help you with your question, Dinah?
Yes, I've heard the other versions and was kind of confused. So this really helps a lot. Thank you.
I imagine it's probably like me. Some of the translators are not clear on exactly the finer connotations of the English word. So I really thank you for saying this, because it's going to make me reflect now. So Geshe is saying that really how this is working is, if we develop a feeling for one of those teachings like bodhicitta, and that feeling is really firm, that feeling will imbue our meditation on emptiness as well, which acts as an assisting factor. So that's how it's actually working. Yeah, simba. So that's the meaning of the connotation of imbued as Geshe is explaining it. If we've cultivated meditation on emptiness a lot, then as a natural consequence, when we meditate on bodhicitta, some of that feeling of emptiness is going to imbue that meditation on bodhicitta, and then it will lift it up as an assisting factor. And because of that, because it is imbued, that means when the bodhisattva is cultivating meditation on emptiness, because of the relationship they've been establishing, their bodhicitta actually increases even as they meditate on emptiness. Yeah, simpa. So that's the meaning of imbued. So I thank you, Dinah, for that question. Actually, that was really helpful for me. And I think you also got some really good explanation from Geshe. So thank you.
Can
I ask a question?
Yes, yes. Is it Suzette? Hi.
Hi,
Hi, Suzette. How are you? Go ahead.
Right, thank you. Okay, last week, Geshe, in his teaching, mentioned that Krita can generate bodhicitta because of the situation that they're in their suffering. And that out of that bodhicitta, they can realize emptiness.
Yeah.
Once they realize emptiness, do they remain in the Krita realm?
Yeah, interesting question. I got it. Okay. Nganso di kasangama gendi nganso di yidak seria di rua konso sam yidak yimpe kaplola jangchu gisem kie tugire duas ane konso di jangchu gisem di kiene dene koronso tompani tok tugire dua dene morangi chiwa dire konso tompani tonayang konso mutene yidak gisuk Degiores konsul kewa jendak chikla drogiores. Karinsena tompani togna dene idak de tes kalekaporedua.
다 이달 대야 깔래 커버인데 대고 데모시라와 다 이달 때 코로 레드 마존나도 때 대고 와줄 때다 강에 두가 뭔가 왔어.
Karinsena tomai. So if it Geshe, you point to a paradox Geshe was saying, but his feeling here is that if that being, even if they've realized emptiness, if they had some karma to be in that form of a preta, right, which is a hungry ghost, they would stay there for until that karma was exhausted. But being a hungry ghost wouldn't be causing them so much suffering because of that realization of emptiness. Ine konda konso tompani tokna nganso digpa chatsangwa jangyore mambo segidu adene di kandesre.
pena otatenda manda jijena la lewita kotes deki ojeres ina yota kange diwa tende te marwas.
So in certain cases, if it's kind of like a powerful accumulation that led to that being in the preta or the hungry ghost realm, they might have to stay for a little while. But even though they are staying there, because of the realization of emptiness, they're not really suffering very much.
대땡이 다가생하루 손스를 마트 찌찌는 주보 쇼한테 체피하고.
But Geshe said that that's his thought on it, but it's also very possible that through that realization of emptiness, a projecting karma is built up that allows them to immediately get out of that preta realm.
pesi wochil tanga zu ta yashu chil sunju chodende korong yaso gnyala nyawanno yobikala. Kororopa de koroni ta mi dorwas ta mi namba no yuarwa.
Yeah, yene konso nyawa de.
Konso pe chale bichala chimo nyodo chog gares.
Yeah. So your question, Suzette, reminded Geshe of another story, and we know that in some scriptures it's saying that the first place that Buddha Shakyamuni, before his enlightenment, that Buddha Shakyamuni gave rise to bodhicitta was in the hell realm. And how he gave rise to bodhicitta was he was in the hell realm and he was pulling a very heavy plow and getting beaten and whipped by the denizen along with his friend. And then from seeing his friend experiencing that pain and suffering, he brought forth bodhicitta. So you're probably familiar with that story. So at that time, the being who became the Buddha, he was looking at his friend who was getting beaten and whipped by those hell denizens as he was pulling the plow. And at that moment, he thought, oh, please don't hit him. Please hit me. I can do all this work. He doesn't have to do it. It is said that he was able to bring forth that thought because of a very powerful meditation on love from previous lifetimes. And that at that moment, bodhicitta was able to unfold. And then the hell denizen, in one of the stories, the hell denizen, he knows what the Buddha was saying. So he said to him, everyone must bear the results of the karma they themselves accumulate. And then he hit the being who became the Buddha in those subsequent lifetimes on the head even harder. And then from purifying whatever that kind of final obscuration was, he was able to escape that hell. And then going from happy rebirth to happy rebirth, right? All the way until that lifetime where he achieved enlightenment. So Geshe would say the same could happen to this preta, to this hungry ghost being who's realizing emptiness, just on the basis of like a small condition, purifying whatever thin veil of obscuration was holding them there, they could be released to a higher rebirth. And then they would not be reborn as a hungry ghost again, but go from happy rebirth to happy rebirth until realization. So Geshe thinks that if you want to think about the answer to your question, also relate it to that story of the Buddha, and then you can come to an understanding. Yeah. And also we can think about the stories on the positive side about how through hearing just the verse about the Four Noble Truths once, Shariputra was immediately able to realize emptiness and become a hearer. It is said that Moggallana, because his imprints were not quite as powerful, his intelligence was not quite as sharp, he had to hear the verse a couple of times before he brought forth the realization.
Yeah.
Thank you, Suzette. Thank you, Suzette, for the question.
Thank you. I was wondering if the Prita, once he realized, had compassion and emptiness, if he would actually want to remain to help the other Pritas.
Yeah,
because he had
Yidak Seriadi ko Tompani Dang Yamdu Jamchu Gisem Chik Tom Nachichena ko Yidak Isacha Dening Jogitis Karinsana Konso Chatsama Dunga Le Drea Gidopaya Resa. That's also possible because remember the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, they make specific prayers sometimes to be reborn in very difficult places to be of benefit to the beings. So Geshe wants to tell one more short story related to this. So this is a story about Shariputra, Venerable Shariputra. As a bhikshu, he would have to go on his alms round. And it relates to something that you may have heard before, that we have to be really careful with how we interact with other people and even with animals, because we don't know who might be a hidden emanation of a bodhisattva. In fact, in the 8th chapter of the of the Ornament of Clear Realizations, the Abhisamayalamkara, it says that in order to benefit beings, the Buddhas can manifest even as inanimate objects, such as bridges, mountains, and so forth. So one day Shariputra was on his alms round. As a bhikshu, he would beg for alms. And as he was on his alms round, he reached a village and encountered a young woman. And she criticized him, saying, "How dare you be so attached to food and come out here looking for it? Why aren't you meditating in the monastery?" Yeah.
And
Shariputra said, "It is not just I who as a bhikshu begs for alms, but even Lord Buddha himself sometimes begs for alms." And then the young woman said to him, "Well, the Buddha, a fully awakened being begging for alms, and someone like you begging for alms, that is not the same thing.
tani ko te to pasane sunji khalalo ando ate jese gipa kari yare ese Shariputra party yare was kon.
And so then Shariputra actually thought, like, as a fully awakened one, why does the Buddha need to beg for alms at all? And he started to think about this, actually.
sunji khalalo ando experience enyo le pe de ate nesu tenda churuina chejina mandawa yare es kos keje bares churunda uchla.
Sorry, Tomba Chomdende Kala Longdu Netsu
Oh,
Chuchu.
gipa mandawa gipa churuina cha chejina chi yare.
So Geshe doesn't remember the exact number, but he thinks it might be 16. Shariputra put the question to the Buddha, and the Buddha outlined roughly 16 reasons that the Buddha had to beg for alms.
tela be ka ta churu te kinde she jage te pe Shariputra pe hales was tande to je mandawa shitende chen tagazre mundis.
And Shariputra was kind of really moved and very impressed by the reasons.
ta tendo je mandawa che to wojire ndes ko ta ko sa so kijido.
Yeah. And in that way, he understood the necessity of the alms.
Ani nimachil da nimachi se matine koroni ke chat sa cha ne Shariputra pandovi kala.
Yeah.
Ta Shariputra gelo isa tane pomoti ke Shariputra ko kija chil sa cha so was tama.
Ale. And finally, after understanding all of these reasons, Shariputra again went for alms. Pumuchik parwa.
Mare Shariputra pomo mara wacha sa.
Mare konguma tuiki pumuchik
Mare
parwa.
tagar ur was saja.
Yeah.
koroni ke chat sa ro garwa.
Ane
Ke
pumadi.
chat Shariputra yon ro garwa.
Yeah.
Lobi ka ta Shariputra dovi kala kisha sa so was.
Ale. And then as he encountered this woman again who offered him prostration.
Mine chena tupa te pomoti thogare was.
Ale.
Jonji sembe konnon yo bachi redus.
Loso.
Ina Shariputra ko gelo isa.
Yeah.
Ko nyete da chombare te gelo isa pomoti chwa sa re was.
Ale. Shariputra pumodi shaksesores.
She was.
Ale.
Sorry, semade.
I didn't understand it clearly. So he went out again, and reflecting upon this, he encountered the woman again. I'm sorry, Shariputra prostrated to her. Now, as you know, in Buddhist culture, right, a fully ordained monastic would not normally prostrate to a lay person. But because of the question, that his-
Koroni tupa pomoti thogare duas.
Yeah.
Shoju samare duas pomote.
Yeah.
Ina yo Shariputra te gelon roas.
Yeah.
Pomoti cha chimotni kisha sa was tama.
Ale.
Pomoti Shariputra.
Ale, Loso. Okay. Sorry, I'm very confused. But anyway, it seems that the woman, normally, she's a bodhisattva. So she is actually higher than Shariputra. But because Shariputra was a bhikshu, a gelong, and not wanting to go against like a bhikshu prostrating to a layperson, she offered prostration to him.
Ta te Shariputra yape sane Shariputra hakosa ko shoju sama cha chimo hakosa was.
And after that happened, actually, Shariputra was a little bit embarrassed because by then he understood that this woman was a bodhisattva.
Koro yaponji to moni mare te. Tani ta yape kala nyani wachila tatachi zere tatachi jima ta gemano te ko tishenda wangana sonsola. Mukangan jiga ya tise yungo was. Lebi kala pomote unjiga les was gemano sonji.
And so then a few weeks later, or something like that, this woman, the monastery opened to receive guests, all the lay people. And so this woman appeared again, and Shariputra encountered her again.
Ta Shariputra tawa kanga mombochi nondo devi kala pomote pagena le Shariputra shoji sama yam hakosa ge lonzo yalo ne kisha sa was pa.
And
ta hakoson.
yes, Hagosung. And feeling embarrassed about what had happened before, Shariputra thought, this woman really is a bodhisattva, and so he offered prostration to her in front of the entire assembly of bhikshus, of monks.
La yamar da waso la yamon do maso. Koro hakosa was.
Yeah.
Di da kin lonzo sha sa was.
Yeah.
Shariputra.
So therefore he offered the prostration.
Moni te moni ga ma ta ya yes. Ani sha sa bi kala tawa kangi kol shale ja so Shariputra. Oh, ale we can say yes.
Yeah,
Oh, toro gelo chi pomol chi sha sa was.
And of course, at that time, all of the monks, they scolded Shariputra and they said, why are you prostrating to a laywoman in front of the assembly?
Ani lonzo pomote ko ta che to wi sang yeshi ge zin. Oh, dandri maso. Konza te te ate karseka. Dipele so gandu so tanon lonzo pomote zete te was.
And so the woman, she thought, actually, Shariputra, like he could run into a lot of problems from the fault finding of his brothers in the monastery. So to demonstrate that she was a bodhisattva, she flew into the sky. And on that basis, they realized that she was indeed a holy being, and they no longer criticized him. So we have to be respectful to everyone is the meaning of this story, because human, non-human beings, animals, and so forth, amongst any different types of being, could be an emanation of a bodhisattva. So we have to be very careful. Yeah. So behind every kind of a great act of the Buddha, there is a very great reason. Is there another question?
I think Martha had a question, and then there's a question in the chat, and then Rudy.
Yes, go ahead, Martha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for my English. I have two questions. The first one, is dependent arisement the basis for understanding emptiness?
Okay, yep.
The second one, compassion is thinking that others do not know about the Buddha teachings?
Sorry, Martha, I didn't understand your second question.
Is compassion the thinking that others do not know about the Buddha teachings?
When you say, sorry, I just want to explore the second part with you further to make sure I understand you properly. You mean, is that the definition of compassion?
Exactly.
Okay, okay.
Because when you see others maybe doing bad things, and then you say, oh, these people do not know about the Buddha teaching. So then you develop the compassion. Is that compassion? I'm sorry.
Yes, no, I think I understand you better now. Okay, yes, I think I understand. Geshe said, if I think the question's too difficult, I don't want to answer. No, it's not true. I just like to get clarity to make sure I get the answer that you're looking for. Ganso tompa ni tenje la tene, penchung la tene togiribes. Dichua tambudi.
Togiribes.
Yeah. Yeah, perna ganso tenje la tene menana tompa ni toya yomares. Yes, so you could definitely say that the realization of emptiness depends upon an understanding of dependent arising. Tenjung hamakonana toni toyo yomares. Because remember, we talk about realizing emptiness through reasonings, and dependent arising is called the king of reasonings. Nipadi. Yeah. And dependent arising, don't think that this is like some really, really hard thing that's impossible to understand. Dependent arising is really just talking about how whatever we see, it arises depending upon causes and conditions. And in this way, our understanding can become more and more refined. So dependent arising is understanding a child being born in the world depends upon its parents. A flower blooming in the spring depends upon the seed, the soil, and the rain. Those are all dependent arisings. When we're hungry and we eat a snack, the hunger goes away. That is also a dependent arising. These are all more manifest or coarser examples of dependent arising. So as we go along dependent arising, we look at the kind of this chain of causality, we can see that things arise dependently, meaning they don't arise from their own side. That is helping us realize emptiness.
하고서 오다 들리고 된다 데리 그렇게 따다래. 오다 된데도 된지사 하마 거는 또 많이 하고 하면 됐어.
So in answer, in a capsule, you're right. Without an understanding of dependent arising, emptiness cannot be realized. 주원이 patanda.
리피 잡고 된데 그때지 미즈 보다 알아. 된데고 돈이 리피 봐 뭐야 알아 왔어.
The king of reasonings of emptiness relying upon dependent arising.
와야 됐어.
To anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the second question was about compassion and people not knowing the Buddha's teachings. Nganso mi duksha sogenchik tonarwa konso nupakeya dang kumajaya dang dinso o konso sangye giche hakogi omares chesang konso nodrup mambo shogi duas di ningje rebesa.
소지 제때
하고기 매장.
대어르세 니지레서는 그랬어.
So you could say that is a type of compassion, yes, thinking the person engages in the negative actions because they are not familiar with the Buddha's teachings.
어떤 이제 내서는 야보 뭐 마시는 건들이 야소나 돈이 이제 그랬어.
Not knowing the way things really are, they're confused, therefore they accumulate the causes of suffering, right? That can be a preliminary to thinking about compassion.
어느 오다 여러 또이나 오다 걸어서들이 강에 뭐다 노안에서 뭐 이런 것 나로요 쟤들이 걸어서 수바 놓지게 진짜 뭐 쏘나 한 얘기 말해 걸어서 쟤 뭐 지라더니 걸어서 노아 뭐 쉬어로 왔어 나로서 뒤에다 마소하게서 다다 쉬어야 말아 걔들 쏘나 요 무슨 바 말해 이제 쏘는 또 그래.
And so we think that, because of them encountering specific conditions, they are engaged in these mistaken actions. And it's not certain that I myself would never encounter conditions that would compel me to such an action. And in this way, we can kind of identify with it, making the compassion greater. No child is born into the world evil. Right? But different conditions come together, different traumas come together, and that can lead to a person engaging in very negative activities. Because we've been able to encounter the teachings and also other positive conditions, we've been able to at least now follow a good path and avoid the same pattern. And so thinking in that way definitely can help us to strengthen our practices of love and compassion. Yeah. So hopefully, Marta, that answered your question.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Martha. So now we have a question from Chris in the chat. She says, what is the best answer to give non-Buddhists when they ask, what is enlightenment?
Nampa mayingen jangshub sere di kareres kechichina len yakshu jaya kareres. Like sangyegi jangshub. So, okay, jangshub loso.
정주 세는 당한조 정주 세는 나로서 시 강가로 봐 매바 쳐봐 하고서
로소
어떠니 아니 내서 니에서 가리기나 차송아 시바달라 정주 세를 말했어.
We could say that the state of enlightenment is having completely rid the mind of faults and having understood all things exactly as they are. We could explain enlightenment as something like that. So in the Tibetan word for enlightenment is jangchup. Jang means purified or cleared away, having completely cleared away whatever is negative. So all faults being cleared from the mind, that is jang. Chup indicates realized, having realized all things exactly as the way they are, understood things as they really are. So that's enlightenment. And once one has achieved that, one abides in happiness, and one's only task is to try to benefit others. So that might be an easy way to explain it to people without the background. Yeah. And the idea is that one who is enlightened has completely cleared away all ignorance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if one meditates on love or compassion for even a couple of minutes, one immediately has a positive feeling. So one sees what is possible within the mind. So as one does this for longer and longer, eventually one can reach enlightenment. Yeah, so that's maybe an easier way to explain it for people who are beginners.
Okay, go ahead, Rudy.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can.
Okay. I was just wondering, when you say that the compassion is imbued into emptiness, if I'm understanding that is it's something that's added to emptiness. I just wonder if that's true, if there are other qualities that could be imbued into emptiness. And I guess I'm thinking specifically about curiosity, because that's quite often a motivating intention to explore the Dharma and try to understand it. That's the question.
Thank you, Rudy. Yep, I got it. Nganso ngama di sinpe. Nganso ngama simpe gi chik dua rua. Nganso di jampe simpe gi tombani rua. Ningje simpe gi tombani rua. Tene nganso so chik di jangchu gi sem simpe gi tombani la gire dua. Yeah, so imbuing the wisdom, realizing emptiness. So simpe, so okay, so then simpe yenda girebes. Perna nganso sorry, then ko chichena nganso hako gi dopa chigure wa di hako na kande ya po res chig sem di Tony Topesherab Simpegi Semchigiana, Didabuchigirebes, Kokitua Diredua. Di Hakona Kandeapo Yores, Samsodi. Tony Topesherab Sina. Yeah, the Yongirebesa. Yes. So definitely you could say something that the wisdom realizing emptiness imbued with curiosity in the sense of how wonderful it would be if I was able to understand that. And that curiosity fits really well, in fact, because the wisdom realizing emptiness completely clears away ignorance. What is ignorance? The absence of knowledge. So seeking knowledge, yes, could imbue that mind of wisdom realizing emptiness. Yeah. So that wisdom realizing emptiness imbued with that mind of thinking, of curiosity, thinking, how wonderful would it be if I could understand that? Because understanding is the opposite of ignorance. That mind imbuing wisdom, realizing emptiness. Yes, that would fit.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Oh, sin. So actually, Geshe said that just to talk about imbued, the wisdom realizing emptiness imbued with, it can be imbued with any of the paramitas. So we talk about being imbued with love and compassion, but we can also talk about the wisdom realizing emptiness being imbued with generosity, ethics, concentration, patience, and so forth. So one of the reasons why the sutra path is said to take longer to reach enlightenment is because we can't cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness together with these various paramitas in one mind. Those paramitas can only imbue that mind of wisdom realizing emptiness.
다 ngāla tūmbāni sōno tō tūmbīngōne lāshēne tā lēkā chēk yuā isa lō chīk sē chīk tōne tā hākō sā rā
Yeah.
pōkē kīnyīgā dō tō yā chālā chīngu yuā isa.
Yeah.
Yukā tō chī kīnyīgā.
So whereas with Tantra, the mind wisdom realizing emptiness is the ground for arising as the deity and engaging in the various activities of method, because the Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya can be imagined to be brought forth in one moment, then the paramita and that wisdom realizing emptiness can be practiced together. And this is why Tantra is faster.
Tā tīsē tēs tūr nō yā līlā wā dō tō yā tī tō tō shū.
Yeah, so that's why we say it takes a much shorter time in Tantra to reach the same realization that it takes in Sutra.
Kō lōngā nyūlōn dō tō kī wā.
It's like the highway, right? It's like you take the freeway instead of the normal road.
Yeah, tē sō.
Yes, so thank you. I guess maybe we'll do one more question before we close, because we're a bit over. I do see.
Go ahead, Dekili.
Dekili, go ahead. Yep.
You're still muted. Yeah, there you go.
I unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay. After Suzette's question about becoming enlightened as a preta, it brought up a couple of questions. Doesn't karma get obliterated when you reach liberation, with the wheel of samsara?
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that karmic results keep playing out after that process, but you're not creating more karmic imprints?
I'm smiling, Dekili, not because it's a bad question. I think it's a good question. I asked the same question after Suzette's to Geshe, but he said, ask that later. So it's funny that we had that same question. But yeah, so shall I ask this first?
Yeah. A little offside is, doesn't it get obliterated with liberation or its subtle imprints or stains or knowledge obscurations at just before enlightenment?
Yes.
Just wondering where karmic. What's the karmic hoo-ha here?
Yes, no, I got your question. Nganso kung arang gituadang chibachi kyare dua ngamang nganso yidak se di tongni tokpe roa tongni tokpa dene yung mambugi nangla tongni tokne digba chatsangwa jang gogire dua dene digba chatsangwa jang ne karichene yidak drogogires di digpa dang digpa gi bakcha ki kecherebes ko digba chatsangwa jangares ine datong shendrip tets yutsang ko dela de gogiredus di drotang kandis chik drogires.
Me tuni tuba lo aletana le masongas yuga nola.
Yeah.
Tuni tuba reza ya kepa res tuni tuba chipa reza ya res si ya res.
Ale loso
Mambo.
loso.
Tuni tuba chipa res da tuni ngesa tuba chipa res ya te. Tagaru mares.
Ngosu du topo mare.
Mares.
Ale
Wana
loso.
tuni ngesa tuba chipa reza yupeja no landi was.
Ale loso.
Del leres.
Ale.
Tuni ngesa tubi jo.
Yeah.
Juju sele ga chipa ko jere mato.
Ale.
Tuni ngesa tuba chipa mares.
Ko ngosu top yo mare.
To
tada.
ya.
So, okay.
Sorry.
This gets complicated, but Geshe says that he thinks he may have made an error when he explained it in the previous class. So it's not a direct realization of emptiness. It's a realization of emptiness. So based upon bodhicitta, gonda jangchugi semdi kiene kale kale sana.
Ida de tumani ngesa de topala chipa reza sonji nog no yares tichi yares.
Yeah.
Hawana ida la tumani ngesa de topa yares ke chale mo.
So there is, how this happened is there was mention in the Buddha's sutra about a hungry ghost having a direct realization of emptiness. And this brought forth the question, how is it possible for a hungry ghost to have a direct realization of emptiness? Loso.
Tani de ke chale de ida la dembores, ida imbala, tumani ngesa de topa yamares.
And the Buddha later clarified that while a hungry ghost, a preta, could have a realization of emptiness, it was not the direct realization of emptiness. So a direct realization of emptiness is not yet possible for the hungry ghost.
다원나 뚜마닝에서 또 바로 티바레잘 빼자노 라도아 소지가 순디와 대가르레스.
And then they said, well, then why would the Buddha have said that in a sutra, that the preta had the direct realization of emptiness? How would that come about?
오 대순바데 드가로 마레스 보데레스.
Yeah.
대가르를 고가르서 뚜닝에서 또 비저 존지 셀라 티바디 고야레스.
And then they say it was understood that he had a realization, but not the direct realization. But because the preta, the hungry ghost, was able to arise the mind of bodhicitta in that realm, he had amassed the cause of the direct realization of emptiness, although he had not yet achieved it. So there's a whole kind of scriptural discussion about this, actually. Because you're absolutely right, Dekili, that if we were talking about a direct realization of emptiness here, there's no question about them having to remain in the state of a hungry ghost. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. 장시샘 사바 토게 니네 노수 토바요 말이로.
미투마니 띵에서 현지설에서 또 받아 계시면 저는 서서 좀 주시야. 투마닝에서도 또 받아 주도면.
Yeah.
된다 예다 이나요 또 현지세사바 토겐디와스.
So the first thing to understand though from this is that amongst the pretas there are those who as a preta are newly able to bring forth the bodhi mind, bring forth bodhicitta.
어때 이자 예다 단도 가슬이나 현지세사바 토게야 이자 땅아주도 메레 딜리주 다 된데 용거와스.
Any of the 6 types of beings within samsara can bring forth the mind of bodhicitta, and therefore certainly as human beings we definitely can.
밑에 콜레야 말당 아주 이해해서 들어가서 계시죠.
Yeah, so Geshe said it might not give you a final answer, but he wanted to clarify what he had said before.
Okay.
다티 빠르던 간zul을 좋아 가리와서 간줄 하나 맞아 봐도 가르레스.
Yeah.
때 좋아라야 그래서 간줄 간갈.
Nganso karechen tomasons.
현지색 맞아 봐도 가르레스.
So here's another question. Assuming you haven't, why haven't you realized bodhicitta? If the hungry ghost has realized it, why haven't you? The answer is we spend too much time enjoying ourselves, maybe. We want to go to the tea shop and talk to our friends and kind of hang out, right?
Okay, thank you.
So thank you. He says, I mean, if there is another question, but I think we are at the end of our time. So we will say goodbye to all of you fine folks, and we will hopefully see you next Sunday. Take care, everybody.